Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Beers.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
Welcome to this episode of Wayward Writers. We are excited today to have Kortney Nash with us. She is an assistant editor at Godwin Books, which is part of Macmillan. So, Nicki, will you please tell us more about Kortney?
Yes, I'd love to. Kortney is going on her fourth year in the publishing industry. She's had the pleasure of working on a wide variety of projects, from board books for the littlest readers to novels for young adults. Recently published books are worked on include Oasis by Gwaying Wojing, In Repair by Al Grazadeh, and Merry Christmas, Dear Mars, written by Penny Parker Klosterman, with illustrations by Estrella Co. Okay, Kortney is also a prose reader at the literary magazine and press Chestnut Review, where she helps the prose editors narrow down submissions to create the short list for each issue. When not reviewing submissions for Godwin or Chestnut, Kortney can be found writing. Her debut picture book, Tell Me About Juneteenth, is already on the shelves, so go get your copy. So fun. And she has short stories featured in The Black Girl Survives in this one and What Rides at Night. Welcome, Kortney. We're excited to have you here as editor and writer. What a fun combo. So thank you.
Thank you for this lovely introduction. I feel so special.
You are.
Absolutely. You are definitely special.
No, yeah, it's my absolute pleasure to be here representing Godwin and Chestnut and writing and everything in between. I'm looking forward to talking about voice and reading. I don't know, I feel like I've read a lot of interesting books lately that have made me excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. You have an amazing list of books at Holt. So what qualities about these voices stood out to you, and do you think helped get them through the acquisitions process?
I feel when I think about voice and acquisitions, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is I guess less of any universal rule about, oh, you should do this to make the voice stand out, or you should do this. But when I think about acquisitions, I just think about like me reading the submission. Like the first, I guess, like necessity for any voice, for any submission that I'm reading is, do I connect with it? And there's not a formula for something like that. And, you know, it's for every editor, everybody has like different qualities that they'll connect with. I think a lot of us can get worried sometimes, like when I get a book that maybe I don't connect with, but I feel like has a lot of potential. And I'm like, if I pass on this, what if this is the next Hunger Games? Or what if this is going to be something huge? But an editor told me once before that, you know, if you don't have the vision for it, like if I'm not connecting with the voice, if I'm not able to see what would take it to that next level, then it wouldn't get to that next level with me. You know what I mean? Like it deserves an editor who's going to be able to transform it or help it to blossom into its potential in that way. So it's a bit of a roundabout way of answering the question. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's when I think about voice on that level, I think a little bit less about it, like the maybe guidelines or suggestions that people may consider following to strengthen the voice in their stories, and more so just about that incredibly basic. Is this voice resonating with me personally? Am I the right editor for this project?
That's a great answer, though, Court. I know you're like joking that it was roundabout, but I would think what that editor said to you would give you comfort on being true to what you want to work on. And then the flip side, as us as writers, when we have an agent or editor pass, to remind ourselves, you know what, that's just not the right person to champion, and we want the right person. I feel like those kernels can really help as we're on both sides of this process. So how do you, as an editor, evaluate whether that voice feels authentic? Come on, we want to know the formula.
I know.
There isn't one.
I know.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's the hard part, but also the magic, I would think so.
No, yeah, I
But
mean,
there
there
still has to
definitely,
be some evaluation going on.
no, there certainly is. It depends, right? I'm really fortunate because I get to work on a little bit of everything, like fiction and nonfiction, books for the youngest readers, like board books and stuff for YA, encroaching into that new adult space, I would say. I look for different qualities in all those age groups and all those genres. In terms of what qualities I'm looking for specifically, trying to think of the most general, like distillation. So I'm not getting like too much into the nitty gritty because I feel like that could be the whole podcast, just an hour, like going group by
Oh, yeah.
group. But I had a teacher once who told, sorry, also I feel like I'm just like, yeah, I had an editor who told me this once. I had a teacher who told me this once. But anyways,
Hey,
I
Love
had
it.
a
We love
advice
it.
teacher.
is advice.
Yes, we'll take
We'll take
any
it.
call.
I appreciate it. I had a teacher, she started our semester off by asking each of us, what do we uniquely know? It's a question that stumped a lot of us because it's broad, to be honest, but also just, yeah, like, what do I uniquely know? I don't know what sets Court's experiences apart from the rest of the world, but what she was trying to get us to think about is that each of us have lived like completely different lives. Even if you have a twin, like your life is still completely different from them. And so I guess this is my way of getting back to voice, just in terms of, I think I look for that kernel of what you uniquely know when reading like prose, specifically in middle grade, because I think that everybody does bring a unique set of experiences with them. Even if you think your life is incredibly basic or normal, there are things that only you know. They don't have to be, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, or they don't have to be experiences of like suffering, which I think is sometimes what we think of when we say, what do you uniquely know? Like, it doesn't have to be trauma based. It's just what makes you. And it's not me saying that every character should reflect your experiences down to a T or anything like that. But just, I think that reading feels more exciting when it feels like you're interpreting an experience that feels completely different from what you know, if that makes sense. So I kind of
Yeah,
look for that,
absolutely.
yeah, that specificity, I guess, would be one word when reading. What makes this stand out? What makes me understand that you're the only person who could have written this story the way that it is. So my broad strokes, what I look for prose specifically, because then of course, like I said before, like every genre and age group has its own like challenges and rewards and things that I would look for. But yeah, in a general sense.
I guess what I want to tag on to what you just said is that I see thousands of queries a year. I probably see 12, 15,000 queries a year if I'm open all year. And it is very interesting because I will get submissions for 100 books about dragons and princesses, and they're all different. So I really do think that you, even if someone gave you an outline, like a complete outline for a book, your book would be different than everyone else's. And I think that to me is what really signifies voice. Like it's what you bring to the table. So I love that. And I think too often we maybe try too hard to create a unique voice when in reality what we should be trying to do is find our
Mm.
voice. So do you think there are any pitfalls or cliches that writers do fall into when they're trying to find their voice?
Ooh, that's another good one. When I really like what you said about finding our own voices, because I agree 100%. I feel like anyone struggling or who feels like they're struggling with finding their narrative voice, I'd always recommend journaling and tapping in with
Oh,
yourself, because we do all
so
have
good.
like, yeah, like I just our own unique way of storytelling. And I guess to bring it back around to the pitfalls, I feel like sometimes when you feel disconnected with your own voice, you're not sure how your voice translates narratively. It's funny, what cliches do I see as people using cliches like more often? You can, and I do this too. I see myself doing this too as a writer sometimes, where you fall into descriptions or just that are generally
Yeah.
accepted, like in the literary world or in pop culture. Like I was writing earlier today, and or I was editing rather earlier today, my own work. I wouldn't talk about anybody else's work during this, but I noticed I had the line like, "Oh, we need to talk never means anything good." And I had to stop and think to myself for a second. In this universe, like that actually contextually, like it just didn't really mean anything. It didn't add anything to the story. And it just felt like one of those cliche lines that we've all heard before. Oh, who wants to hear? We need to talk, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to pull myself to the side and be like, this doesn't feel like a court thought. You know what I mean? This feels like something that I added in because it just felt, it belongs there. Like that line fits in so much as anything else can. So yeah, I feel like to bring it back to the point, just I think sometimes when we default to pop culture, maybe like popular phrases sometimes in a way that doesn't serve the narrative, that's when we lose our voice. When I think about what do we uniquely know, sometimes it's something as small as you may know like intimately the way that a sprinkler sounds going off at 5 a.m. in the morning. That's not knowledge that I have. I live on the third floor of my apartment. That's genuinely not knowledge that I have. But you read a book sometimes that has these intimate details that you just haven't been exposed to before. And it adds a whole new layer to the story and to how visceral it is. I think sometimes to finally bring this to a close, just infusing like those more specific details in place of, I think, sometimes the more general cliches that we can default to. And it doesn't have to be the first draft. That's always something you can do editing, rereading. I always say get the first draft down and then revisit it and tighten things up.
You were saying that, and it made me think of the fact that about 4 weeks ago, I was parked in this little town called Skycomish, Washington. And the only place to park was right near a train track. And we were so close to it, we were probably 15 feet away from it, that I could feel the train coming in my chest. And I should write about that.
You should.
You should.
I should include that in my nonfiction proposal.
Absolutely. I will make that note.
Yeah.
All right.
That's so true, though. Here's my question for both of you. Defining voice is the nitty gritty, what I'd love for you guys to do. And my piggyback question is, what is the difference, or is it the same, in our voice as the writer and our character's own unique voice?
I don't know. Do you want to tackle it first, Heather?
Oh, I can, but I would love to hear what you think.
I got it. Oof. Yeah, this is another really good one. I guess to start with to make sure that I'm understanding the question actually before I go into another long soliloquy, it's the difference between the writer's voice and our character's voice, right?
Yes. And
I think like your overall authorial voice is what you're talking about, Nicki.
Yes.
And the difference between that and our like an actual character's voice. Especially I think these get confused in first person a lot.
And I feel like the definition of voice is partly where we as a writing species start to like fumble. Well, what is voice? Like, and when I hear voice, I sometimes think of both of them. Your voice as Court and your character's voice, and how your voice informs your character's voices. But how do we determine the difference and go from there?
Got it. No, that makes total sense. Because it is, like you mentioned, like I feel like it can be incredibly hard when writing in first person, especially. Even more so if you're writing a story that utilizes a lot of your own lived experiences and so on and so forth. I think like I hesitate to make any sweeping statements. I do think that the distinction is important, even if you're writing something that may be like auto-fictive or that uses a lot of your own experiences, only because short of writing like a memoir or autobiography, I always lean toward having a bit of, I think the importance of the narrative voice, that it gives you a little bit of distance from the work. And sometimes that distance is necessary in terms of getting feedback and doing revisions. So that's why I say, again, short of writing a memoir or something like that, I would lean toward making sure that your voice feels distinct, or that you at least feel distinct when you're writing it, so that it doesn't, so you're able to interpret and utilize that feedback without having your feelings hurt, essentially. But in terms of actually like differentiating your voice from your narrative voice, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think if I have any like tips or tricks that I do personally. That's also something for me as an editor that I'm not necessarily able to tell. Like when I get someone's submission for the first time, like how it differs from the way that they talk in real life, and how different this narrative sounds from the way that they actually, speak or storytell, etc. I'm trying to think of authors who I've read like a breadth of work from to see in my
Maybe
mind like how is it
maybe it's an
differed.
unanswerable question, right? Maybe that's the search that we're on. Like when you read something and it pops, right? It's, oh my gosh, the voice is so good. And in my brain I immediately think it's the characters, right? If it's depending on what point of view. I don't know. It's fascinating to me because I know they're different, but
They are different. And I think authorial voice, you're going to see overarching between works, right? Like when someone has they have found their authorial voice, there's going to be like thematic similarities. There is going to be part of it encompassing the way maybe they structure things, or like I see authors continually going back and touching on certain subjects, or maybe all of their characters are going to have similarities or things like that. But I think you have an authorial voice, but when you're writing first person, you're going to distinguish. You're going to distinguish the difference between you and the character. And of course, the thing is about authorial voice is it's in the background, right? Like it's making all the choices for everything in the book, even as far as like world building and that kind of stuff. The author is the one choosing those things. That's part of their voice. It all like feeds into authorial voice for me. But I think that when you have a first person narrative, the character is going to have their own opinions that don't necessarily align with the author's opinions. There's going to be secondary characters whose opinions are going to go completely against the author's opinions, right? So to me, that's character voice. Like you have a character that is like a real person who has their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own opinions, their own actions they aren't necessarily going to follow. And the decisions, though, that those characters make, I think are still part of authorial voice. But they have to be done in such a way that you're true to the character themselves. I don't know, maybe that's too complicated, but also you can shift, the tone of the manuscript. You can shift all within your authorial voice. You can shift all of those things. You can shift style. You can shift, like, even different characters can have different styles and things like that. But I don't know.
So how is voice different from style and tone?
I think Heather really just hit the nail on the head with voice does feel like a much more overarching thing that you see across an author's body of work. And I felt like to the story that's being told.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to have a one sentence answer, but I
Oh,
feel
for
like that is
sure.
like the bare bones of it. In some ways, I think it all goes hand in hand. Like I imagine voice in some ways as being like a person's like sense of like fashion, like a sense of like physical style, and then you have each story is a different outfit, so to speak. If you see them all together, you can tell they all came from the same closet, if that makes sense.
I love that.
Yes,
That is
that's
such an
it.
apt description.
Winner chicken dinner, Court. There we go. Yes.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
couldn't have arrived here without Heather's just really beautiful description earlier. Yeah, it just helped me like conceptualize what
Yes.
sets voice apart and how you see the consistency, but also the differences each time. So
And that's why sometimes we go back to a beloved author because it's their voice, right?
Yeah.
It might be a different story, but there's something we know that's going to inherently happen that we enjoy.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's like you build that trust. I think sometimes, like when you find an author who you really and you find that you can read multiple of their works and feel satisfied each time at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any examples of books that have, or that could possibly be maybe a study for us in having really memorable or unique voice?
Ooh, I finished reading The Secret History earlier, I guess last month now, since we're in September. Just like a classic, but I had never read it before. It's also like super long. But that was one of those books that I picked up and the voice just drew me in. I kept on trying to think of the perfect, I guess, like phrase to use to describe it, and I kept struggling. It's like, it's dark, it's academic, it feels British to me, but it's not. It's based in America, author's American, I think. But yeah, I was just really charmed by the voice, to be honest. And it reminded me, and that's the other thing, right? When you find a book whose voice you really enjoy, I search for other books that may not even be the same genre, but the same style, even if the author doesn't have like
Mm-hmm.
other work to explore. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent though. The Secret History, the voice was really strong. I've read ML Rio's, what is it called? If We Were Villains, and also Graveyard Shift. The voice is also really strong there. That's also like a more dark academia. If you want to read a pair by an author and kind of compare back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Read a few different Natasha Pulley books, and Natasha Pulley, I feel like, love her or hate her. I've seen so much stuff about her books online. But if you read multiple of her stories, you really do get that sense of consistent voice, I would say. Like, you get the humor in each book, the very specific brand of humor that she has as well. And
Mm-hmm.
just the way that her narratives, like, structurally tend to have a bit of a like winding feeling, to me at least. And you do get that in each story, and that consistency I think is comforting. I've also read a lot of Stephen King, but honestly, even, and I've enjoyed a lot of his work, but he's not someone who I would say who I would recommend for this exercise, to be honest. And the reason that is because with Natasha Pulley, and I've also read a lot of Toni Morrison books, and she also has a really strong and distinct sense of voice that carries through each story. I think the reason why I enjoy Stephen King's work is because even though the voice is strong, it's quite subtle. Like, his work is what I read when I feel like I'm in between books, or I feel like I need a palate cleanser, because it almost just feels like a blank slate. And I'm saying this in a complimentary way because I enjoy his work, and it's something, again, when you read like multiple books by the same author, you have this trust and feeling like I'm going to be satisfied by the end of the narrative because we've been on this journey together multiple times before. So that's a bit of my long-winded way of giving a few recommendations if you want to try reading different authors and seeing if you can catch that thread that's being woven throughout each story. I don't
I
know.
love that horror's your palate cleanse. I love that. I need a palate
It's
cleanse.
true though.
I
His
guess
voice is very stark.
it's yeah. No, I agree. I like his work too. I just, most people would be like, interesting, the palate cleanse, poetry. Nope,
I totally get it.
it's King for sure. I just finished a book that was like a dark thriller. The voice was so good that, and the pacing was not, but I couldn't put it down.
Mm.
Like,
Oh wow.
I know,
Interesting.
but I was just, I don't know, it was so compelling. The pacing picked up and it ended up being good, but I said to my husband, I don't know why I can't just be like, this book isn't for me. And he's like, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I talked it out, but it was like the voice was just
Mm.
so unique and so compelling that I was like, I have to stay with you on this journey. And I was glad I did, but it's
Interesting.
interesting.
I do feel like
Wow.
voice is one of those components where sometimes if other things aren't working as well, like a really strong voice can keep you hooked to the page. So I've also been
Yeah.
in that situation where I've been reading books and I'm like, I can't tell where we're going. I don't really know what I'm reading toward, but I can't put it down because I'm
Right?
like, I'm entertained nonetheless. So I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to see where we end up. And that's powerful. I think that's really
Yeah,
difficult to pull
It is
off.
powerful.
it is. It was a kind of a compliment. I thought, I was like, you're doing something right here. Because I asked a friend, hey, pick this up. Am I losing my mind? She's like, no, I finished it last night. I'm like, okay, it's not just me. Okay, so how do you recommend we as writers build a strong narrative voice? What do we need to do
Mm.
to develop this?
I think there are a
Right.
few different things. Yeah, that's the big one. To write short stories, like I said before, I'd recommend journaling, honestly, and journaling consistently, I think would be like a big thing. Because again, I think if you're just trying to develop like the bare bones, like what is my voice before you start exploring like how can I transform my voice for different stories, it's kind of like a thing, right? Like you want to
Yeah.
develop like who am I at the baseline, and then after that feels strong enough, then I feel like you can really dive into developing these characters and so on and so forth. But yeah, aside from that, aside from journaling, writing short stories, writing long stories, just write and don't stop. Read a lot and read widely. I always say, don't just read what you want to read. Read genres that you wouldn't usually explore, about experiences that you wouldn't usually maybe be interested in, age groups that you wouldn't usually read for. I think genuinely, like, the wider breadth you have with the books that you read, it's just you're all the better for it, honestly. And you learn so much from each story. That's the thing I'd say, read widely and read critically. And I don't mean critically in the sense of read these books and hate them or something like that, like constructive criticism, read them and like you were talking with your husband and your friend, reading them and really getting down to what made this compelling for you or what made this not compelling for you. And I think having those conversations, whether with yourself or with others, it just all kind of help in creating like that writing practice that I think writing is one of those things like we don't go to the gym for it, but it is a muscle that we need to develop and strengthen each day. And that doesn't happen without work and effort and intentionality. Yeah, I think that would be like my main advice, just making sure going to your metaphorical writing gym each day and taking the time and energy to build upon that skill.
So we can write our different, where our different style, right?
Exactly.
It's all coming together full circle here.
You can get all those outfits. Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so let's shift a little bit to character voices. Do you have any tips for writers who are struggling to find a character's voice?
That's an interesting one. Honestly, what I've done in the past, more so for like side characters, so I'm having trouble developing because they're not the main focus, is trying to just write like from their perspective. If this is, again, obviously if you're struggling from writing like from the character's perspective in the first place, then this isn't the best advice. But this is, if you're writing from third person, or again it's like a character who maybe doesn't have a POV chapter but you want to develop them, I've in the past written from their perspective, and it's just really helped me to clarify in my mind like what details I've been missing and build out their backstory. Even if none of that is going to make it into the narrative, it just gives me like a stronger grasp on who this person is and what their motivations would be. I'd say if you're struggling with like exactly that, like struggling with writing from their perspective in the first place, can always be helpful if you have an idea of a character who they remind you of, or like a person in your life who they remind you of, like locking in and doing some thought exercises to try to see the world from like their point of view. I think that would honestly be the main one. Something else I've done that may or may not be helpful is I try to keep a running notes app on my phone. I just write down observations like of different people that I see in the world, or like different things that I see and hear and experience. Like when you're talking about feeling the rumble of the train in your chest, like that's something I'd want to write down so I don't forget it. And I feel like reading these different sensory experiences, like while I'm writing, when I'm stumped, they provide details that I can utilize to create a more vivid world, especially if it's stuff about people who I encounter on the subway or random pedestrians and stuff like that. Like all of these kind of minuscule things that you see during the day and forget about by the time you get home, like having them in one place to look at, I've just found is really helpful in terms of trying to figure out how to build a character up and figure out what really makes them feel like they're alive, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I love that. I also love the thought exercise of if I were going to move to a different place where nobody knew me and I could become anyone I want to be, like, who would I be? Because I think what it does is it takes you like out of your own head. I can change everything about myself. What would I change? Or if I wanted to be like this other person, or I'm just tired of this or whatever. It's a way to explore other parts of you that are going to make those characters feel authentic and genuine, but also very different from the main character.
You both have
100%.
brought up these actionable steps that are so much part of the fun and the play of writing, to be reminded, right? Yes, we need to write the words. Those have to happen. But there's all these opportunities to play, to search out our voice and our style and things like that. It gets me excited. So thank you. So let's talk about format. How does voice vary in picture books, middle grade, YA versus adult novels?
Absolutely. I feel like the main thing is like when you think about your audience, you want to think about accessibility. For example, like the book I mentioned earlier, The Secret History, that's like an adult book. And part of what makes it adult is like, of course, the actual content, but also just like she's using some really big words in that book and some really complex sentence structures. I'd say, of course, like you can have YA novels that similarly have that really like academic and complex and intellectual feeling. But at the same time, you may consider keeping things simpler for that audience. Ditto for middle grade, especially for picture books. I think one thing when writing picture books specifically, it's like the story is not just shorter, it has to resonate with this whole new audience. And like sometimes the observations that we make as adults like don't resonate with that audience. So it is kind of finding like those similes that make sense for them. I can't remember what I was reading, but it was a book that mentioned something like, oh, it was red like jello, for example, instead of like red like cherries or something an adult might say. Even though a child is familiar with cherries, like a picky eater food, I feel like that may be too bitter for their palate and may not resonate the same way that something more common for that age group would. So I think that that's just what I keep in mind when thinking of these different groups. What do these pop culture wise and excessive vocabulary wise, what makes sense for this audience? And I think that these are things that don't even have to change like the tone or the style of the story, just more like the nitty gritty of the language that's being used.
Catered to the audience that you're writing for, yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. Do you think that there are expectations from the audience for a certain voice depending on the genre, like romantasy versus contemporary or sci-fi or military sci-fi? I feel like that's a different voice
Wait, that's not
altogether.
the same?
Honestly, like I do feel like back in the day there was like a greater expectation. Like I feel like reading older fantasy novels is a completely different experience than reading more contemporary fantasy novels. So I feel like they were much more, I don't know if inaccessible is the right word, but they were just, I'm thinking of like The Hobbit and these other kind of tomes that have the goblins and I don't know, like centaurs and whatnot. And they just style wise, voice wise, I think had a lot of them like this very dense writing style that wasn't bad or anything like that, but did define the genre. And I think honestly, these days, I see so much more, I guess maybe experimentation within the genres, a lot more like fusions, like horror comedies and fantasy that isn't like an epic. This is just the world that they live in. And it's been really interesting to me. I like it. I feel like it opens up reading to people who would have been intimidated before. Ditto for sci-fi, like you mentioned before. I feel like we used to have a lot of really hard sci-fi with the technology elements are really dense and serious. You have to read through like pages describing like the ship's layout. And I say this as like a devout Star Trek fan. That's my show. But it's also nice to just see a lot of sci-fi and fantasy these days. I think that they're bringing in completely new audiences. And the stuff that's maybe a little bit more classic will always be there. So I don't think that it's a negative thing. I'll be interested to see things shift back because I feel like things are always changing, right? Like in the book world. But I don't know. I'm enjoying this moment that we're in.
I think once the cat's out of the bag, it's not going back in.
I think you're right. I do.
Yeah.
Especially like now people can see like the audience is there. These genres don't have to be like this like exclusive kind of thing on like the top shelf that nobody can reach.
Yeah. And I think TikTok has really expanded, and now it's other things too. I think fan fiction did the same thing. It's expanded reading more into the everyday space. It just feels, if you want to read something, there is something out there for you. There's every level of reader. There's every level of like genre. Do you want epic fantasy? Do you want barely there fantasy? Just a tiny speculative element? It's there. It's there for you to find. So I love it. I think it's amazing.
I agree. It is. It's really nice to see. I don't have a talk account, but I do feel like that has definitely TikTok and social media in general, right? Just played a large role in books into more people's hands. I use Reddit to find a lot of my books.
Interesting. I've not heard of that.
Oh, they have such good, I feel like, different book forums. I feel so hesitant to ever like really champion like a specific brand because I don't want Reddit to pass with a scandal tomorrow or something. But I found some really good recommendations on there though. A lot of great readers and great like literary communities. Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, all of it. I feel like however you find your books, it's nice to be able to connect with people in that way.
Yeah, the local indie.
Exactly, yes. That's what I need.
Yeah. So once you acquire a project, Court, how do you, as the editor, what role do you play in helping the author refine their voice?
I mean, I
Or
think
do you?
Oh, that's a good,
yeah,
yes, or do you?
that is the hard part. Cause yeah, I feel like definitely like I don't really acquire books. If I'm really not connecting with the voice, I feel like I'm not the right editor for it. So I won't really
Okay.
acquire anything that feels like it needs like a huge overhaul in that sense. I would hope that my authors agree with me, but I feel like with the books that I do acquire, I loved reading them. So I feel like reading them multiple times feels like it gives me like
Mm-hmm.
a good sense of the character. And I just try to like make suggestions to push them and challenge them about, does this feel like something the character would actually do? Does this feel like something they would actually say? Genuinely, I'm so fortunate to be working with people who are so incredibly talented that I feel like they make my job so easy that like the suggestions, I'm doing my best to make good suggestions, but they have so much of it figured out that I just get to be like really lucky and watch them create these brilliant stories and cheer them on. It's not the most exciting answer, but I definitely do my best to push them where I can or where it feels appropriate.
That's
Yeah.
great.
I think that's great too, because I think if the voice is the unique thing that they're bringing to the table, you really don't want to change it. That's how I feel about it
100%.
anyway.
Yeah.
That is why when it doesn't resonate with you, passing on it is the best thing to do, because I do think that their voice is their brand, right? It
Mm-hmm.
becomes their brand in the end. And I think when you try and tamper with that, you're messing with with their unique thing that they have to offer the world. And I don't know.
So do you
At
think?
least that's why I do it. That's why I pass on a lot of stuff, even when it's good, is because I just did it yesterday. Amazing book, amazing author. And I was like, I'm going to destroy this. If I try and take it on and give them an edit, I'm going to destroy what they already have, because my vision just couldn't, it just wasn't the same. That was very long winded too. So I'm
No,
sorry.
no, I agree 100%. I honestly resonate with a lot of it. 'Cause it's like even the stuff that I feel like I leisure read, like outside of work, isn't stuff that I would necessarily edit. A lot of my favorite books aren't things that I
Right.
think I would have chosen to edit. Because yeah, I don't know, it's just difficult. I don't want to butcher any stories, like you said. So it is, I think passing it's always for the best when you have that gut feeling, even though sometimes it can hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you two think it might be a warning flag if an editor or agent does ask for an overhaul of your voice? Is that something?
I I would say yes.
Yeah. I think, yeah, if it's like an overhaul of the voice, then I feel like it's probably just not a fit. If it feels like the feedback is encroaching beyond maybe structural concerns for the plot or pacing and stuff like that.
Or audience.
Exactly, yeah, audience is another good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like maybe it's just not the right match.
Yeah.
It's good to know for our listeners because, as you guys as writers too, sometimes we allow it to feel one-sided, and it's not, and that's not the intention of the acquiring professionals either. Like you said, be true to yourself. Don't be true to your story. It is your story.
Yeah. I agree.
Exactly. It's never inappropriate to ask an editor or agent like what their vision is to see if there's a way to meet in the middle, because I think when someone is asking to overhaul your voice, like they may be misunderstanding what you're doing or misunderstanding like what the crux of the story is. I think like everything starts with communication and kind of thing you can end up
Yes,
on the same
Hmm.
page, to use a book pun.
love it, love it.
So tell us, do you see any trends, shifts in voice and kidlit, upcoming things that you're excited about? What do you see coming down the line?
Oh yeah. I feel like honestly, I have such mixed feelings about trends. Like I try to, of course, keep aware of what's happening. I disservice like my authors, myself, the company if I don't. I also try not to put too much stock in them because trends just feel so transitory, if that's the right word. Like they're just coming and going so often, and publishing takes a really long time. So it feels a bit of starting a race a bit late if I'm seeing stuff that's already published and I want to pursue the trend, because my stuff's not going to be out for at least like a year or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's the tough part. But in terms of stuff that I've seen, I mean, I've definitely been, and myself included, seeing a lot of people turn their attention to the reluctant reader for
Mm.
grade and YA, looking for stuff with shorter page counts. I think a lot of us are really trying to consider the effects of what has happened to these kids who were children, like during the lockdown and the pandemic, and who did like these essential years of schooling online, whose reading levels may not be what used to be the standard for their age group. And they're also growing up with like phones and tablets and TikTok. Like,
Yep.
I think kids today, they're just in a completely different landscape than what any of us were accustomed to. Yeah, I guess like the trend would be like the shorter page count, but I think just like in a more general way, trying to figure out who exactly our audience is right now, because I don't think that this upcoming generation of readers is really anything like we've seen before. We want to be able to serve them in the best way possible and introduce them to a love for reading the best we can in a way that meets them where they're at. So I think that's been what I've seen.
I love it.
Can we get it on a card, please? No, I love that though.
I do too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right. Where can we follow you or your books coming out?
Yes, I'm like an incredibly boring person. I'm on LinkedIn under like my government name, Kortney Nash, KortneyNash. I'm also on Twitter, that I don't really use it that often. Those are really like the only social media. But I'm on Twitter at Kortney, but it's spelled QuarRrTKNEE. Anything that's posted. If anybody wants to get in contact with my mom, she's also a writer and she's really chatty. She's a great person to know.
That's great.
But yeah,
we should have her
that,
on.
Yes, for
yeah,
sure.
I'll let her know. Yeah, aside from that, I feel like LinkedIn's probably the most reliable way to keep in touch with me. Yeah, and I think my email might be on there too. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. And
it was fun.
A lot of actionable exercises you both gave, which is huge for anything, but especially voice. So thank you for that.
No, thank you both. This was such a good time. And I don't know, it's always fun to think about these elements that I think I take for granted sometimes. You know what I mean? They don't often come up beyond just, I connected with the voice, or I didn't connect with it. So it's nice to dig deeper and also challenge myself to think about it in a more critical way. So thank you for this opportunity and for chatting with me about it.
Yeah, it was great to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.